Most of the greens that we use at Christmas time are actually have herbal uses. They have herbal uses that are very serious herbal uses that they've been used for medicine, they've been used for food, they've been used in religious ceremonies, and they have a very interesting history of how they have affected mankind. All of our evergreens, the herbal evergreens of Christmas. And this I brought especially for the Lighthouse School because I thought that you would get a big kick out of this. This is a potpourri recipe. This is Mrs. Thrift's Christmas potpourri, and I don't know, Lori, if you remember the year that I did this for the first time in the shop, but Mrs. Thrift's Christmas potpourri is based on the fact that when Christmas is over and you begin undecorating, you've got all of these dried greens, and all of those dried greens are full of fragrance. The needles are full of fragrance. You break the wood is full of fragrance. There's a lot of lovely fragrance there. Why do we throw them away? Why not turn them into a potpourri? This is your recipe for doing that. So any of you who are interested in doing this, for next year you can begin, and you can even have the kids doing it, you can begin some of your product for sale for next year with this year's dried up Christmas greens, cleaning out your kitchen cupboard with old spices that may have gotten a little too old for cooking but still have some fragrance to them. And this is the recipe that you can begin with. Next year, when you get around to packaging, or when you are beginning the preparations for this and the packaging begins, you can add a few drops of oil. You can do some scented pine cones to put on the top. You've got a product ready to go. Anyway, it's a lot of fun. Let me pass these out. I'll give them to you now. All right. And then this long season of Christmas, this long Christmas, this wonderful, wonderful, wonderful way of celebrating, not compressed, not waiting for one special event, one special moment, but actually celebrating in a very small, quiet way each and every day that people have celebrated and are still celebrating in many parts of the world, joining them in that celebration. It's incredibly satisfying. And sometimes people say, look, I have a family, we have established routine. If I start telling my husband, or if I start telling my kids, good morning, it's St. Nicholas Day, they're going to say, yeah, and this is where you need to drive me today, and I hope you don't think I'm giving you presents, because I'm not, kind of. But what you can do, as you learn the stories, as you learn some of the customs, what you can do is quietly incorporate them, quietly weave them into your daily life. If you fall in love with some of the stories, if you fall in love with some of the possible traditions that you might want to incorporate into your family routine, you can do that very quietly. It doesn't have to be a big deal. You can begin by just looking in the mirror in the morning and wishing yourself, Happy St. Nicholas Day, Happy St. Lucy's Day. It's the solstice today. I think I'll light a candle, and I don't really care what anybody else says. You can call your best friend and say, you want to go out for a bowl of clam chowder? We'll celebrate St. Nicholas. St. Nicholas was a patron saint of fishermen, of sailors. You can say to a child in your life, do you know what today is? It's St. Nicholas Day. Happy St. Nicholas Day. And just turn and walk away and leave them wondering about what you're up to. And when they ask the question, you can say, so would you like to learn about St. Nicholas? Because he was a real person. And in all honesty, he was. St. Nicholas Day is December 6th. December 6th is the beginning of Christmas in many European countries, especially Holland. To this very day, St. Nicholas arrives in Amsterdam by boat And if you have the right kind of channel on your television, you can watch him live next year. All right? The story always said that St. Nicholas came from Spain to Holland. And to this very day, he comes into Amsterdam Harbor by boat. He's met at the dock by a man all dressed in black, sometimes called Black Peter, his helper. There is a white horse for him to climb on, and off he goes to the streets of Amsterdam, and St. Nicholas has arrived, and the Christmas season can begin. So who was St. Nicholas? St. Nicholas actually was a real person. He was born in what is now the country of Turkey at the end of the 4th century, about the middle of the 4th century actually, I think it was 343, around that period of time. Nicholas was born in a little village called Myra, just on the coast of Turkey. Nicholas was the only son, the legend says, of an elderly couple. Now, in my head, Nicholas's parents were probably about 35 years old. So that was about as elderly as you got in many times in those days. But Nicholas was born to not only well-to-do parents, but elderly parents, and, his legend says, devout Christians. He was raised in a Christian household. When he was about 16 years old, a plague came through the village of Myra, and both of his parents died, along with a lot of other people there. One of the people who died, the story goes on to say, was the village priest. That left the little Christian church in Myra without a leader. And so the priests and the bishops from surrounding areas decided to hold a conference in the church in Myra and choose a new priest for that community. And the story says that Nicholas was in the habit of attending church almost every day. He would go and say his prayers at church almost every day. On this particular day, the priests and bishops from surrounding communities were meeting in the church, and they were arguing. I'm busy, not I. It won't be, I don't want this church. No, who? Which one of you will have? They could not agree. Who would be the next priest for Myra? Who would take the place of the priest who had died? And finally, one man just smashed his hand on the table and said, I really don't care. As far as I'm concerned, the next person to walk through that door can be the priest in this church. The door opened and walked Nicholas. That is supposedly how Nicholas became the youngest priest that Myra had ever known. At the age of 16 or 17, he was declared the priest in Myra. He went on to become bishop. He lived, according to his story and his history and his legend, a very long and fulfilling life. There are many, many, many stories about St. Nicholas. By the 15th century, Nicholas was the single most popular saint in all of Europe. There was no saint that was more popular than St. Nicholas. He had become the patron saint of Russia. He was the patron saint of all kinds of cities. He had adopted through those centuries, from the end of the 4th century right up to the 15th century, he had adopted all sorts of groups. He had become the patron saint of sailors, of maidens, of children, of bakers, of all kinds of groups of people had adopted him as their patron saint. And every single one of those groups has story after story after story about beloved St. Nicholas. There wasn't a church or a chapel in Europe that didn't have an altar or a spot dedicated to St. Nicholas. He was that popular. But of all the stories about St. Nicholas, the oldest one, the very oldest story that anybody knows about St. Nicholas, has probably touched everybody in this room. The story is this: that Bishop Nicholas was known for his kindness. He was known throughout the community for his generosity. And in this village of Myra, there lived a man, a very kind man, a very nice man, a man who was widowed. He had lost his wife to a disease. He had lost his business through no fault of his own. He had once been prosperous, and he was now very poor. He had 3 daughters. He loved his daughters dearly. They lived in a small mud hut right at the edge of the village of Myra. The girls worked hard, their father worked hard, but there was one thing that made his heart exceedingly heavy, and that was that he knew that as soon as his oldest daughter became of age, of marriageable age, which was about 14 years old, that law required that she either be married or sold. No such thing as a spinster. No such thing as an unmarried woman living at home. She could not be married without a dowry. The father, no matter how hard he tried, could not accumulate a dowry for his daughter. And he knew that on the day of her birthday, her coming-of-age birthday, that without a dowry, he would have to take her to the center of town and offer her to the highest bidder. It broke his heart to think about that. The night of her birthday, the family went to bed with exceedingly heavy hearts. And when they woke in the morning, there, just inside the window, was a bag of gold, enough gold to provide a dowry for the daughter. When the second daughter came of age, exactly the same thing happened, another bag of gold. When the third daughter came of age, the father thought to himself, I have to find out who our benefactor is. I must find out who I need to say thank you to for this, because he was sure there would be a third bag of gold. And so that night, instead of going to bed, when his daughter went to bed, he stepped outside and he went into a little bush that was outside of their little house. And he crouched down and he waited all night. And he waited and he waited and he waited, and nothing happened. Nothing stirred, nothing happened. And just as the birds were beginning to spread their wings and flutter a little bit and make those early morning bird noises, just as that was happening, he drifted off to sleep. And he woke with a start just in time to see a figure running around the corner of the house. He jumped out of the bushes, he ran after the figure, he grabbed the man by the cloak, and he fell to his knees and he said, I don't know who you are, I don't know who you are, but I have to thank you for what you've done for my daughters and my family. And he looked up and he said, Bishop Nicholas. And Bishop Nicholas helped him to his feet, and the man said, Bishop Nicholas, what can I do to thank you for what you've done for my family? And Bishop Nicholas said, nothing. There's just one thing that you can do for me, and that is never tell anybody what I have done for you. And the man said, I promise I won't. I promise you I won't. And of course he didn't keep his promise, because otherwise I wouldn't be telling you the story.